Okay, so I just want to run kind of briefly through the basics of getting into that channeling space and actually run you through the process of getting into the space that you need to be in to start channeling. And what we're going to do today is attune to the energies of the circle of Sirius and channel from there. And of course you can attune to anything that you want to channel. You can channel your own ego, you can channel the universal mother, you can channel the circle, you can channel your dead father. I would advise to attune to sources that you know and trust to be of high love and of a minimum frequency of unconditional love and above, and who are really aligned to divine plan and purpose and love and wisdom. There's all sorts of things that we try to channel through people all the time, and most people are not even aware when they're channeling entities and all sorts of things, and some of that can manifest actually mental disorders and strange behaviors. But so what we're going to do today is attune to the energies of the circle of Sirius, and it's really like attuning a radio. It's like, what station do you want? And we want the circle station. Beep, 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 boop, boop, boop. And they don't talk like that. This is my circle channeling. We basically, what you do, it's the same as when you call in a particular energy without the words. I mean, you can say in your head, I call the circle of Sirius, and that's so lovely, but you don't need to do that, because that's really just you in your mind, using your mind to help you get in a particular space. But and it's just like running affirmations. You know, the words are there to help you, but it doesn't actually help the process, because the process is a feeling process. And so when you seek to attune to a particular source or call a particular energy, what you do is actually, you know how that energy feels, and you kind of vibrate that energy out. It's like, you know, if I'm calling the color orange, I'm going to visualize orange, for instance. If you want to call the color green, you're going to visualize green. When it's kind of doing like this, but on a feeling level. If you want to call the energies of the circle of Sirius, you actually feel the energy of the circle of Sirius, and it's just that law of attraction, but also of kind of resonance. That's your vibrational resonance. Like attracts like, and it is attraction. Magnetic resonance, where you resonate in a particular way, and it will attract that which resonates in the same way, in harmony with what you're resonating with. And that's why we say, you know, you got to live your life, walking through your life, being aligned and centered and radiating love, and then what you will attract more of in your life is love, and the things that are going to help you embrace more love. And that can bring all sorts of challenges, because really growing into more love is always going to mean stretching beyond your comfort zone. So anyway, you resonate with the energy of the circle of Sirius, you feel them, and then you're going to start to feel that connection come in. It's like they feel you vibrating out the energy of the circle, calling out to them, and then they then respond, and you're going to feel that response. And this is an energy that you should all here be familiar with, so you know how it feels, and you recognize it. And so, of course, we talked about yesterday the importance of getting out of the way, getting your small self out of the way, getting your monkey mind out of the way. And we talked about the importance of being aligned and centered in the spirit self, and of letting go of unworthiness and self-consciousness. And really, if you get out of the way properly, no matter how self-conscious you feel or how unworthy you feel, that will be get out of the way, because all these issues are issues that are of an egoic nature, the issues of fear. So if you get yourself as an ego and a separate personality out of the way, then yourself as a spirit can just be, and then the channeling can happen, and the energy that you're connecting with and attuning to and aligning to, they can then start to flow through you, and then the energy can start to flow, and hopefully you can then start to translate that in words, into movement, into art. What we're going to practice here is words, because that's, you know, we're not going to start dancing on the stage, and we're not going to paint on the walls. So, and you know, channeling through words is a very important skill for anyone who seeks to move into leadership in the future, because you talk all the time, you communicate with other people all the time, and you can't start drawing a picture for them anytime you want to channel. It's if you want to channel through your art, that's a great way to channel a lot of things, but it's good to have the ability to also channel in the form of the words, because that's most of your encounters on a daily basis is going to be in the form of conversation. The written word is also a lovely thing. Once again, you can start just write to someone who is in front of you because you want to channel something for them. Being able to speak it is probably much more useful in the moment. Hold on, I have a message for you. Not a good look. And you don't need to announce that you're channeling. So why do you need to announce that you're channeling? Oh, it's not me talking now, the guys, so if you hate what I said, don't hate the messenger, You don't need to do any of that. You take responsibility for the role that you play as a channel. Whatever comes through is the message that Spirit wants to come through. If you're dedicated to Spirit, if you're dedicated to Spirit, you don't need to, sign a waiver that, I can't take responsibility for anything I say. That's just immature, and, it's not really about mastery. So you start to channel, you don't need to announce it. You just enter that space, you align and center, you really get in the heart, you get into that Spirit self, you get the separate self out of the way, and you start to then call in that energy, like I talked about, and then what you need to do is commune with that energy. And all of that, really, the more practiced you are, the more that happens very quickly. It's not a long process. Hopefully you are centered and aligned all the time, but it's good to really make sure that it's in the clearest, most expanded, unified way possible as a Spirit self. And then you commune, and the communion really allowed that spirit of unity, of oneness, where you actually become one with the source that you are channeling. And this is how things can really start to flow. If you're looking, let's say, to the circle, because that's where we'll channel today, from here I am, and the circle's over there, and like Michael said, all you're going to be able to do is try to depict the picture that you see the circle signaling at you from afar, but that's not going to flow, and it's going to still be filtered through the separate self. So Spirit experiences no separation. Spirit is always in unity and oneness and connectedness, and when you really identify with the Spirit self, entering that state of unified communion with the energy that you seek to channel, it's very easy, very natural, because Spirit naturally will be at one with everything that is in that same state of Spirit identification on various levels. So the unity should be there really quite naturally. So you just commune, and then you allow the energy to come through. And really, when you start talking, you just need to start talking. Even if the first few words that you say, or the first few sentences that you say, you're not sure what you're going to talk about, you just need to start talking, because once you start to be in a flow of talking and you stop thinking about what you're going to say, if you're thinking about what you're going to say, straight away you've got in the way. The monkey mind is in charge again. The monkey mind is filtering, the monkey mind is making decisions. So that's straight away, if you find yourself trying to think about what you're going to say, whoa, no, I'm not in space anymore. Align, center, be in the heart, be pure energy, be feeling. Let the mind out of the way, and just don't think about what you're going to say. Just start saying hello everyone, and whatever, just really simple things. It's nice to be here, and you can use things like this that are just starting to get in the flow of speaking while you're receiving and flowing that energy through. And then the words will come. You'll start to get a sense, an idea, an inspiration. I'm talking about this. And then the words will come and come and come. And, all of you will have experienced that when you're doing your archetypal dialoguing. When you do the dialoguing, you start with, hello, I am the archetype of the destroyer, and I destroy and destroy and destroy. Isn't that wonderful? But then before you know it, you start to really come up with a lot of stuff that's coming from the different aspects of your psyche, revealing to what patterns it's playing out around that archetype. And so it's to some degree, when you're doing dialoguing, it's like you're channeling the own fractured aspect of your psyche, and sometimes also channeling guidance from your spirit mentor around what that archetype is really about and how you can express that archetype in a healthier way. So dialoguing is a form of channeling. It's maybe not the highest, clearest source that you can channel, but it's a way of exploring your own psyche, so you can start to clear anything that doesn't serve and start to make conscious things that have been running unconsciously. And the same way when you start to channel, you get really into space, line-centered, just be the spirit self, get the monkey mind, ooh, what am I going to say, oh my God, what are they going to think, all that chatter out of the way, get the egoic fear out of the way. It's not about you. It's got nothing to do with you. So you, the small I you, get out of the way, allow the energy to flow, start to talk, and let it come through quite naturally. You may want, sometimes you have a theme, okay, today I'm going to channel on this theme, and then things come quite naturally. Sometimes you don't, and you have to just, that energy to me feels that's coming through, makes you feel really, brings up for you things around joy, and so you can start talking about joy and what that brings up as the energy comes through, just the inspiration that comes through around what joy is and living in joy is, or what comes through really start to reveal things in your own experience that will be around whatever, walking the talk of mastery, or how to look after a dog, or I don't think the circle have much interest or experience about how to raise a dog, but you can channel really on pretty much anything that's that's relevant to the source that you're channeling. If you channel your dead father, and I don't recommend it, what you're going to get in terms of the information and the subjects you'll talk about is probably going to be quite different than if you channel the circle or the universal mother, for instance. So you just got to attune to the energy and the knowing within that, and just, it's an intuitive thing. It's a knowing thing. You don't have to think about it. The only thing that you use from the lower bodies is the words, the language ability, so that what you're trying to say comes out in words. But like I was saying on the first day, you need to be able to speak directly from the heart and directly from that knowing, not actually having to filter everything through the mind and just apply the filters of the mind. So you stay out of the way. The mind, the only thing it does is lend you the ability to use words. That's all. So you start talking, and then you get in the flow, and you stay out of the way, and then when you channel, there will always be some of what's channeled that's for your audience and some that's for you. Whether you channel in writing or you channel orally, you'll get a sense that something's actually relevant to your process. And it's you go like, oh, fuck, that's for me. And you'll get a sense, and the more you practice, the more you'll get better at it, because sometimes when you begin, it's a bit hard sometimes to know what's for me and what's for people, because we have all issues in common, and there's a lot of things that we share that we can all relate to. So it's not because something's relevant to your process that necessarily shouldn't be shared with the audience, but if you don't think about it and you're out of the way, you'll get an intuition around what needs to not be said, and actually that's for you. That's for your process and your growth and your insights, and then what's actually that's coming through, that's for the audience. And sometimes it's for both, sometimes it's only for one or the other. And I noticed that myself in my experience, particularly when I present for like more beginner students, where it's almost like I get different levels of the same thing that I'm channeling about, and there's a level that's for me and there's a level that's for them. And if I start telling people about stuff that's meant for me, and if it's too advanced for some of the students there, it can actually create more fear than good, So it's not about baffling everyone with your deepest bullshit or your, most enlightened understanding of what you're conveying to them, because, but let me tell you about what I'm getting, because I'm so fucking advanced. And because all it does is really, it can scare them, or they don't really understand it, so they can get a distorted understanding of what you're trying to share to them, because they're not there yet, they're not ready for that particular understanding. So all they can do is try to grasp it through lenses that are going to really, just distort the message. Or it can actually be too much and start to freak them out, or it can make them feel inadequate because they can't get it. So that's not a good thing to do. When there's something that you clearly feel, no, that one's actually my issue. That's about my issues and my process. And this one's actually what I need to share. It's not a thinking process. You just know in the moment. It's a feeling you get. And you'll find that the more you practice, the more that will be quite natural. You'll just start talking, and then there'll be that little bit extra at the end that that's actually not meant to be said. That's for you. Sometimes it comes like this. Sometimes it's just, that bit's for me, that bit's for them. And sometimes you'll get something coming through and you'll get a sense that, no, don't share that. and that's fine. And it's all coming through for a reason. It's not like spirit doesn't know what they're doing, but it's all coming through for a reason. But you'll get a clear sense of that. It's an intuition in the moment. You just know, you just feel it. Sometimes you can see, if I said that, the consequences would not be of love. You can see, you can kind of see in advance people's reactions. And so, maybe you can find a different way to express that same knowing in a way that's going to not create those reactions of fear. And sometimes you just don't say it. So when you channel, you can't think about what you're saying. You can't filter with the mind, but you'll get a knowing and a feeling in the moment that certain things need to be maybe tempered down so it's less confronting for people so they don't freak out. Certain things are meant for you, certain things are meant for them. Certain things are meant to not be said, and maybe it's for you, but later. Or it can be all sorts of things like that. But, when you're so in the moment, it's like you don't stop to think about each thing. It's like, tomato, left, carrot, right. Tomato, left, carrot, right. You don't have to think about it. It's a very natural kind of dance. If you find yourself having stops and starts a lot with the channeling, things flow and then it dries up. Things flow and then it dries up. And it's kind of like, I'm in space, I'm not in space. I'm in space, I'm not in space. That's usually what happens if you really stop and start with the channeling. Means you're getting in and out of space. Maybe your self-consciousness is getting the better of you in moments, and that kind of stops the flow. Or maybe you're starting to think in that moment. Maybe you're thinking about what you've just said. It's like, oh wow, that was very clever. Oh wow, I wish I'd known that. I wish I could say that myself. And if you start to think about what you've just said, then you're out of the flow. You're out of the moment. You have to be very present in the moment with the channeling. And so that will stop the flow. Sometimes what happens is that you're facilitating and someone interrupts, and that can also really break the flow, which is why we generally say, okay, we tell you when you can ask your question, or we keep some time at the end, because somebody can ask a question that kind of gets in the way, stops the flow, and then you can't even remember what you were talking about. It happens sometimes that for some reason you lose the connection. That happens to me sometimes. It's just I'm sharing something in the moment, and it's almost like it's happened sometimes that I'm almost like, something comes out and it's shared, and I'm like almost like, tripping with it. I'm like, what was I saying? So these moments of absence as well, you have to try to remain very present and not kind of start floating off into the energy that you're channeling, because that can also really get in the way. So there's lots of little tricks like this. The more you practice, the more you learn what works, what doesn't work, how to get better at it, and how to stay in that space and stay in that flow and really get better.
In order to be receptive, to work with higher intelligences and to bring forth new knowing, you have to attune harmonically to that higher source. So that means going into a deep meditative state. And of course, when you're in a deep meditative state, most people can't even move, let alone talk. So it takes quite a while to learn. When I first started to do this, when I did my mediumship training in the early 90s, every day I would sit and I would attune to particular sources which were trusted, which I knew were of love and had demonstrated their unconditionalness and so forth to me. And I would attune to them and then start this melding process with these energies. And I would work on surrendering to resonating my field in a way which was sympathetically resonant to that particular source, and then allow the ingress of that particular source to some degree bring forth intelligently a certain knowing about a particular subject. So I had to attune, and then when you attune to a higher intelligence, you just get this real sense of just how much that source knows, that intelligence knows and understands, and the breadth of its view on things, which is way beyond your normal horizons. But stuff. If you just sort of have this sort of vague, amorphous, talking about life, the universe, and everything, you just get overwhelmed with this knowing. So you need to target to a particular audience. To some degree it's easier if you have a client or a particular audience that you're working with, because you hold them, and then that becomes the target for that particular knowing, and then the extent of understanding and the spiritual development and in evolutionary terms and so forth of the particular audience becomes the context, which is then becomes a lens through which that knowing is expressed. It's more difficult when you're doing channeled writing or whatever, because you still have to have a target audience. A lot of people who want to write, they just tune into upstairs and they go, hit me with it. Hit you with what? So it's the same process. You must attune to the higher source. You've got to be really clear, like we talked about yesterday. Get out of your own way, but you have to then very strongly conceptualize what the target audience is. It may be a particular demographic. It may be aimed more towards women. It may be aimed more towards people who are trying to break free, for instance, from the dogma of orthodox religiosity. If it's limiting them and holding them back, they've outgrown it or whatever. So you need to be very clear about what your target audience is, and then as you attune, then you need to surrender to being the vessel, the spot within the macrocosm through which energy is focused, and then concentrate on assimilating that knowing and then expressing it towards a particular audience in a way which is relevant to the times that you live in, relevant to all of the conditioning parameters of the civilization and society that you are aiming towards. And that means you're having a broad range of understanding of analogies that you can use, terms of reference that you can use with which are somewhat mechanical or scientific or musical or whatever, depending on the people, the client or the audience that you're relating with. Really, you don't need to be an expert on anything, but you need to know a fair bit about everything from music to quantum mechanics to all the areas of science, to physics, of engineering. Otherwise you're not going to be able to translate things in terms, using terms of reference which are easily assimilated and understood by the people that you're relating with. Another mistake that people make is, they have a client who's a bricklayer and who's just sort of starting to wake up, and something will come through in a reading, and the person who's doing the reading then couches what's coming through in terms which they would understand, and the person who's receiving it just looks at them completely blankly and thinks that you're a complete idiot and loses faith in the whole spiritual process. So you have to express things in a way that particular person is going to understand. You never ever fish. Psychics fish. I see the colour blue. Well, the colour blue means something to everyone. What does the colour blue mean to you? Well, it means this. I'm hearing a name that starts with one of the letters of the alphabet. Does that mean anything to you? It's like, oh, God, help us. If you're genuinely tapped into a higher intelligence, you do not need to fish for information, for seed, from the person that you're reading for. That's a charlatan's trick. People do that because they can't actually tap into a higher intelligence. They need to elicit some sort of a response, an emotional response from the target, so that they're just fishing and throwing stuff out until the person gets, activates on the emotional level in some way, and then they can start just following that trail of the emotional stuff, which is going for. That's psychic bullshit. You don't want to get into anything like that. So you tune to this higher source, and then it's kind of a co-creation. And the higher intelligence that you work with, be it the universal consciousness, which is less sort of entified, or certain beings that are on a slightly higher level of evolutionary plane than we are, who've actually chosen for their next stage of their learning to actually reach down to these levels and to share understanding from a higher level. No matter what the source is, it needs to be trusted. There's no shortage of astral nonsense and negative entities and stuff that are looking for any opportunity to possess people. So you need to be very, very disciplined when you do this. Very, very, very disciplined. You've got to be able to recognise unconditional love, and you need to be able to recognise a trusted source. If there's any sort of sense of fear associated with anything which is trying to come through, or power, or giving orders, or feeding your ego and telling you how great you are and how you're the chosen one, all that sort of stuff, that's not clear. It shouldn't happen, because as part of the I am, you refuse communications which originate on the astral plane. But a lot of people aren't disciplined with that. If you're not disciplined with that, then you can really run into problems. So you need to have your wits about you. But if you get scared about what might come through, guess what? You're just going to attract a fear-based entity. A lot of people start doing mediumship when they're hopelessly unprepared. They haven't done the work on psychological clarity. They haven't done the work on the 4 pillars of the self-esteem foundation as far as the human being is concerned, and therefore they run into all sorts of problems. But if you are prepared to crawl before you walk and walk before you run and do everything as a stage thing, you won't have any problems, particularly if you use a trusted source like the circle that we work through. And part of their chosen learning at the level they're operating at is to provide very, very clear high-level guidance to mediums who are prepared to operate way beyond the average clairvoyant or the average psychic. So when I first started doing this every day as an extension of my meditation, I would started off laying down and then sitting down, and I would go into a deep meditative state, and I would attune to these higher states and higher intelligences, and it can be quite overwhelming or really heavy, and then I'd practice moving my finger and that finger and that foot, and lifting that foot and lifting that foot, and moving an arm, and then I'd have my eyes closed, and I'd be in synchronous unison with these higher intelligences, and I'd be going, yeah, I'm going really well, I'm moving my arm. Shit, I'm not moving my arm. It really felt like I was. And then both arms, and then standing up from the chair and sitting back down. And then some of you saw me, even in the late 90s, and still if I was channeling certain sources, I couldn't move off the spot. I was just riveted on the spot. But over time, I've learnt to be able to do it without the theatrics that most people love, all of that, which brings the attention to the messenger rather than the message, which I see is all about ego and glamour. So I've worked really hard to be able to go in and out of these high-level mediumistic states without that, and to do it as seamlessly as possible. But I practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. There was times when when I started doing a lot of classes where I would spend an hour or more every day going in and out of these states, and then just being standing up, moving. Yourself. Sometimes when you do, even if you do yoga or something like that, you can go into some really, really quite altered states of consciousness, and then to be able to maintain certain spatial awarenesses and so forth, it takes real practice to be able to simultaneously hold these various states. So it's something that you need to cultivate. You need to practice over a period of time, and you need to be willing to surrender, because and to be able to stay out of your own way. There's some of these higher intelligences will just know so much more stuff than you've ever even considered. So you need to be able to not act surprised, and also not fall into the trap of taking credit and going, well, this is actually me. I actually know a lot more than I thought, and I'm really clever.
Or I am the circle.
Or I am God, or I am some high level being, or if you ever had the opportunity to channel one of these high level beings that still works very closely with this planet, like Jesus or someone, and it happens, and then you feel that strong connection. If you're not clear psychologically, you're going to go, hey, I must be Jesus. That sort of nonsense, that sort of ridiculous nonsense has no place in high level mediumship. You are a link in a chain. You are the translator, and you do the best that you possibly can to translate and to convey. But you don't take any sort of personal credit for that, right? That sort of self-aggrandising behaviour has no place in this sort of path. It's a way of humility. So you must be really, really, really vigilant and disciplined with your practices as far as humility is concerned, and so forth. So what we're actually going to do this tomorrow, where we'll get you to first thing after lunch, we'll get you to attune, and then to share a message towards a particular a small group, right? So we'll say to upstairs, okay, this person's going to channel, and these 3 people are going to be the audience, so that you don't have to try to convey the message to a group where someone's come from an Eastern City Yoga background, and someone's come from perhaps a walk on the wild side in the last few lives, and someone's come from a Muslim background, and someone's come from a Catholic background, and you're trying to sort of get it. So, that takes practice. That's the gift of tongues, speaking in tongues, what it really means. Not gab, blab, gab, babble, 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 talking like a 2-year-old. That's not the gift of tongues. The gift of tongues is sharing a message and everyone understands it in terms of reference which makes sense for them. That takes real practice, and that'll be part of the ongoing continuing training. So we'll do that tomorrow, and then we'll do that again on Friday and see how you've gone over a few days. So really what we're looking at today is just getting you to feel into some of these sources, and then we'll go, okay, hold now that you have a client who has this sort of background or these sorts of issues, or you're working with a Rotary group, doing a talk at a Rotary get-together, or you're giving a talk to a group of people, the Psychics Union or something, and just sort of see how the energy moving through you starts to change. And then you start to get a feel for how you can translate that, how you can share that. Yes? Okay.